computer. Okay, good. So we talked about how everything that's in Shemot, just to remind you where the direction that we're headed in before we start reading. Today we're going to have to read a lot. The direction that we're headed in Shemot, from the beginning of Shemot, he says you're going to go to the people, you're going to be the representative, you're going to free them, the Sineh, and he tells him that he has to. We talked about Sineh and Sinai, and where you have Ani Hashem, and so on and so forth. And then he starts to, he has the otot that he tells him about, and then the process starts, and the situation gets worse. And after the situation gets worse, he comes to Hashem. He tells it to him, and Hashem tells him Ani Hashem, and that's that famous Ani Hashem piece. That process, first of all, understanding that answer better, and that entire process we show in volume 2 of the that's not out yet, which we're going to talk about tonight, how it literally tracks the Shemot movement in the Torah, how Tehillim in book 3 of Tehillim, from the 74th, 5th, and 6th Mizmorim, literally tracks the process. But not only are we going to show how it tracks the process, these are Mizmorim you're not familiar with, 74 you're certainly not familiar with. Not only do we show that it tracks the process, but the tracking itself, when you see how it tracks it, it ends up being a commentary on Shemot, a prophetic commentary on Shemot, an expansion on understanding the ideas in Shemot in a way that's really, really extraordinary. And we'll talk about, when we finish this series, whether that takes, so far we've been 2 weeks, and it might take weeks yet to finish it. In other words, it might take another 2 or 3 sessions, whatever it'll take. It may take more than that. But at the end, we'll talk about what the effect of knowing all of this is like, and what it means to us, and how much it changes things. These commentaries on these Mizmorim are game changers, because nobody interprets any of the things we're going to read this the way you'll see. It's all brand new material. People have fought with these Mizmorim for a long time and attempted to interpret them, and have really come up with lots of difficult translations, difficult interpretations. The gist of what it's saying is there, of course, but we say that there's a lot more going on. On the screen, you know what? You can give that. I have only 2 of these. You can give, here's 1, and here's 2. You can give that 1 on the other side. You can look, and I'll tell you where you can open to in these sheets. People online are looking at it. If you want, I put up on our, what is it called? The chat?
Class chat.
The class chat has a link. If you'd like to look at it on your phone, you can click on that link. In the class chat, I put a link.
All right. What page, Ronnie?
What page? It's turn to where it says temporal terms. Yeah, flip through it, Morris. Tell them what page. I don't know. Temporal terms.
The page number at the bottom.
It's different. I have a different set of page numbers. It's past the yeah, you'll what? No. Keep going.
Page 279.
279. Morris.
All terms, page 10.
Page 10 of no, but the one they're looking at is 279. On the ones you have,
Yeah, 279.
Online.
10 of 15.
oh, on yours it's 2. On your
Yeah. 279 page at the bottom, right there.
Oh, here,
No,
279,
it's
Mars.
10 of what you sent, but it's page 279 of that.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay. Now, you have to have the Mizmor. If you have a Tanakh in front of you, you can look at a Tanakh. Mars, you gave out Tanakhs?
Yeah.
Yeah. What we first and foremost have to do is look at the Mizmor and have to read it and translate it. We'll do that straight through. Don't want to spend time interpreting it. We are going to be interpreting it. Now, I just want to read it so you familiarize yourself with it. Mars, you have the JPS.
Yeah.
If you want, I'll read the Hebrew and you can, you folks can follow along. The Zoom people at the beginning of this article that you have, the link is the Mizmor itself. Am I right? In your sheet that you have over there?
It is.
Yeah,
Yes.
you have it?
Yeah, it is.
Somebody has it. Whoever has it, open it up. Yeah, right?
You got it.
The
Yes,
Mizmor right
correct.
in front of you there, correct? At the very beginning of your of the file. Yes, folks?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Yes, good. Okay. So you can look at that and look at that translation and follow along, and we'll try and read this as quickly as possible. Let me just tell you that you're in the second Mizmor in book 3. You're in the third Asaf Mizmorim in Tehillim, just to get perspective. The first one occurred in the 50th Mizmor, which we write about what Asaf means, and that 50th one is connected to the Korah Mizmorim, 42 to 49 in book 2. So, and remember, always remember this. I'm just reminding you, for those of you who know, every Korah is connected to an Asaf. Every Asaf is connected to a Korah. Therefore, it forms an A, B, B, A structure. 42 to 49 is Korah. 50 is an Asaf. 73 to 83 continues Asaf, but it's in book 3. And 84, 85, 87, 88 is Korah. So you never have an Asaf without a Korah without an Asaf. You never have an Asaf without a Korah. Therefore, the ABBA structure. Where are we located? In volume 2, we have already written at this juncture that we're at now to tell you in the book. What did you say? You're on page 2. Yeah, so you're almost 300 pages of commentary at this juncture, which you're not going to need for tonight's class. I just want to give you a perspective. It has up until this point, the commentary has written about the Korah Mizmorim in book 2, 42 to 49. It's given perspective on everything in book 2. It's written about Shlomo, which was in the Festschrift, which you people have access to if you'd like to look at it. The commentary in Shlomo, that's about 100 pages or 80 pages anyway. It's very extensive in the Rab's Jubilee book. Did anybody see that over here? Has anybody? Yeah, good. You liked it?
Yeah. Except for the first.
You didn't. You know about it. You didn't.
Except for the first 3 pages.
Yeah, it's very, 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 very interesting. I'm telling you, like it. You like it.
Damaging the first 3 pages.
That said, you know about the Korah now. You turn to book 3, which is Asaf, which is dealing with the religious establishment. Korah is talking about the political, the king, the monarchy, and all of the political establishment. And Asaf is talking about the religious establishment. Book 2 is like Shemot. Book 3 is like Vayikra. And a lot of material that we talk about has explained in detail how that in fact is the case.
So 45, 46, the all Asafs?
That 42, 43.
45 to 49.
No, 42 to 49 is all Korah, I said. 50 is an Asaf, I said.
Okay.
73 to 83 now here in book 3, you're on the second of the Asaf in the book. 73 has opened up by, is referred to as the famous theodicy one. Kineti Beholalim, he was jealous, and of course we show that every word in 73 is talking about the priests And it was really the priests that were the enemy, even though it sounds like he's talking about the most evil human beings on the face of the earth. Now we'll turn to 74 and we'll just read. Maskil Asaf. It's a maskil. We'll talk about maskil one day. Lama Elohim zanachta lanetzach yishana pechai b'son maritecha.
Why, O God, do you forever reject us? Do you fume in anger at the flock that you tend?
Zechor adalcha kenita kedem.
Remember the community you made yours long ago.
Ge'alta shevet nahalatecha har sion zeh shechanta bo.
Your very own tribe that you redeemed Mount Zion where you dwell.
Harima fe'amecha lemashuot netzach.
Bestir yourself because of the perpetual tumult,
Kol hera oyev b'kodesh.
all the outrages of the enemy in the sanctuary.
Shagut zorecha b'kerev moadecha.
Your foes roar inside your meeting place.
Meaning the Beit HaMikdash.
Yeah.
Samu ototam otot.
They take their signs for true signs.
Yivada kimabi lema'la b'spoch etz kedumot.
It is like men wielding axes against a gnarled tree.
Ve'ata pitucheha yahad b'chashil v'chelapot yahalomu.
With hatchet and pike, they hacked away at its carved work.
So now, of course, he's witnessing the destruction of the temple. He's witnessing the enemy destroying and burning everything down. And he's witnessing them in the Beit HaMikdash with axes and pikes and chopping, they're chopping down the like, let's say the Aron and everything that's located in the temple. Shalhu be'esh mikdashecha.
They made your sanctuary
Yeah, go ahead.
go up in flames
La'aris halalu mishkan shemecha.
and brought low in dishonor the dwelling place of your presence.
Amru bilibam ninam yahad.
They resolved, let us destroy them altogether.
Sarfu kol moadeh el ba'aretz.
They burned all God's tabernacles in the land.
That means that all the synagogues,
Yeah.
right? In today's times, that's how you think of it. Think of it like no. This is going after the synagogues. Kristallnacht, they're destroying where they broke those businesses. Over here, they went to every synagogue in the land, and they burned them down. Ototenu lora inu
No signs appear for us.
en od nabi
There is no longer any prophet.
v'lo itanu yodea adma.
No one among us knows for how long.
Ad matay Elohim yaharef sad
Till when, O God, will the foe blaspheme?
yena'etz oyev shemcha lanetzach
Will the enemy forever revile your name?
lema tashiv yadcha v'minecha lema tashiv yadcha
Why do you hold back your hand,
v'minecha mikiref hakecha chaleh
your right hand, draw it out of your bosom?
v'Elohim malki mikedem
O
poel
God,
yisrael b'kerev haaretz.
O God, my King of old, who brings deliverance throughout the land.
Ata porata b'ozechayam
It was you who drove back the sea.
shabarta rashe taninim alamayim
With your might, who smashed the heads of the monsters in the waters.
tarasasta rashe leviatan
It was you who crushed the head of Leviathan,
tetenenu ma'achal le'am l'siyim
who left him as food for the denizens of the desert.
ata bakata mayam v'nahal
It was you who released springs and torrents,
ata hobashta naharot etan
who made mighty rivers run dry.
l'cha yom aflecha layla
The day is yours, the night also.
ata hechinota ma'or v'shamish
It was you who set in place the orb of the sun.
ata hesafta kol gevulot eretz.
You fixed all the boundaries of the earth.
Is it aretz? No, it's eretz. I can't see. Aretz, yeah. Kais v'choref ata yisartam.
Summer and winter, you made them.
Zechor zot oyev heref Adonai v'am nabal ni'atzu shemecha.
Be mindful of how the enemy blasphemes the Lord, how base people revile your name.
Al titen lahayat nefesh torecha hayat aniecha al tishkach v'netzach.
Do not deliver your dove to the wild beasts. Do not ignore forever the band of your lowly ones.
Habet laberit
Look to the covenant,
כי מלאו מחשקי ארץ נאות חמאס.
for the dark places of the land are full of the haunts of lawlessness.
אל ישוב דח נכלם, אני ואביוני הללו שמך.
Let not the downtrodden turn away disappointed. Let the poor and needy praise your name.
ומה אלוהים?
Rise, O God,
ריבה ריבך.
champion your cause.
זכור חטאתך מני אבל כל היום.
Be mindful that you are blasphemed by base men all day long.
אל תשכח כל צורריך,
Do not ignore the shout of your foes,
שעון קניך עולה תמיד.
the din of your adversaries that ascends all the time.
Okay,
I'm thoroughly
so
impressed.
this was what, if you're depressed, it's the, along with the 44th Mizmor and the 79th Mizmor, these are the most it is depressing because it's a detailed, Yirmiyah is giving you a detailed description of how he views the destruction of the temple. In the 79th Mizmor, you're going to see the destruction of Jerusalem depicted by Yirmiyah. Samu et Yerushalayim. The scholars all ask, and don't have an answer for, why does the 74th Mizmor come first and the 79th Mizmor come second, and why are they separated the way they are? Oh, it's just potluck. Oh, that's the way it is. Oh, it should have been the destruction of Jerusalem first. Then it should have talked about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Because, by the way, because that's the order of how it happened, right? The temple Jerusalem is broken into, and it takes them a month. That's what Shabbat Asar B'Tammuz in the second temple was. In the first temple, the city walls go down on, do you remember when? 4-9, not right, Tisha B'Av, 4-9, right? The previous one, 4-9, and the temple is burned on 5-7, not 5-9. We second temple 5-9. So it's 4-9 to 5-7, which is just a few days short of a full month, right? So the city was already gone when the temple was destroyed. The temple was like a fortress, and they were able to, it took them another month to break through, which is pretty amazing, because if you think about it, the whole city is destroyed, everything's burned down to the ground. The soldiers have completely control of anything, but they can't get in. They can't get in for a full month. It
Well,
takes
two
them.
dates given. One is 5-7, one is 5-10. Right?
Yeah, but we're using 5-7 now for purposes of this class. There's a nice discussion of why that is, but it is 5-7 anyway, just to let you know, the main date. That said, the 44th Mizmor, which is the third of the Korah Mizmorim, and the 74th Mizmor, which is the third of the Asaf Mizmorim, happen to both, right? There's 12 of one of Korah Mizmorim, 12 Asaf Mizmorim in Tehillim. The third of the Korah ones talks about the destruction and Gelut. The third of the Asaf ones talks about the destruction, but of the temple, not of the city yet. That doesn't come till 79. So there's like a lot of parallelism that goes on, and a lot of amazing details that reveals, that nobody is aware of what I just told you. Nobody. They're all clues because they don't know what Asaf means. They don't know what Korah means. They don't know what these Mizmorim are talking about. That said, there's good reason, which we'll see we'll see if we'll even get to this answer, but I'll tell it to you. The reason 74 turns to the destruction of the temple is because 73 opens up, the second Asaf Mizmor opens up with a discussion of the corruption, the deep-rooted corruption in the religious establishment, in the priesthood. The priesthood, when you hear him describing it, he writes in the 73rd Mizmor, if I would have said this, right, that I'm talking about the Kohanim, he says it says it in subtext. He doesn't say it explicitly. Nobody knows that it says that, right? Nobody ever, hasn't been seen. That's for thousands of years. But once you see it, if I would have said that I was talking about the Kohanim, I would have been a traitor to Dor Baneka. The people could not have coped with him talking about this. It would be the equivalent in today's time saying all the rabbis are corrupt, all of them, and not corrupt, not there, you disagree with them. You sounds like you're talking about the Nazis. It sounds like you're talking about the Hamas. You're talking about the worst kind of human beings with deep seated and rooted corruption that is, it's just pure wicked and evil and bad, and they're running the temple. So of course, after he opens up the book talking about the priesthood, which is a long commentary in the book before this on 73, explaining it in detail. Eli, at that juncture, what do you have? He turns to the temple because he says, and this is what ended up happening. The very next thing that he talks about is look what it's doing. But is he happy? They wanted to kill him. They were coming after him. They were the worst, right? But of course he's not happy. Of course he's devastated. He's devastated. Is he? By the way, a side point: does he feel bad that they're wiped out? They themselves, the bad evil priests.
Yes.
He feels bad about
Yes.
the collateral damage. That's what he feels bad about. He feels bad about, no, he feels, of course, the temple going down. I'm talking about the very bad, evil guy. He's the worst. He has blood on his hands. You're not crying about the guy with blood on his hands. You're crying about the fact that there's men, women, and children who never did anything. Who not only men, women, and children, innocents, people who are good people. They're just not enough good people, but there's good people around, and they're all slaughtered. So of course he's devastated by this, but he turns to it because it's the very next thing that's the subject of the third book and what he wants to talk about. Now we'll turn to temporal terms. You know, everything takes time. I wanted to say that in 5 minutes. But a number of key terms. Is everybody with me?
So what page are we on now?
We're on
270.
279.
Right.
And Eli, you can turn to temporal terms. A number of key terms with connotations of time, frequency, eternity, and the like are employed throughout Psalm 74. You just read it. You only read it once, you guys. If you read it a lot of times, but I think you all heard the terms. How long? How long is this going to go on? Ad matai. That stuck with you probably. Very good. Very good, Sammy. The psalmist focused on temporality is also reflected in the different verbal tenses employed to highlight how God acted on Israel's behalf in the past, to describe the tragedy of the present, and to request divine intervention in the immediate future. Some of the temporal terms indicate the urgency of the psalmist's prayers, while others refer to God's eternal dominion. The picture is clarified further by a brief verse-by-verse consideration. I decided when I was writing this that we have to do a brief pasuk-by-pasuk movement so you get a good sense of it. Maskil asaf, lama Elohim zanachta lanetzah, for those of you who are watching on the screen, you see the Hebrew and the English translation. If you're not, you don't follow it. As we have observed, the psalmist introduces this prayer with a desperate question. Has God truly deserted Israel forever? The word netzah is used throughout to highlight the psalmist's anguish at present situation. Israel cannot bear a perpetual state of ruin. God must not desert Israel forever. God must not allow the enemy to go on blaspheming forever. Verses 3, 10, 19. Such usages highlight the specter of Israel's interminable suffering, thus amplifying the urgency of prayer. You know, I have never taught a class like this in the middle of a war. Every time I'm talking right now, it's very hard. You know, any time over the last 50 years, I started teaching when I was in my early 20s, right? And now I have to tell you, I've never taught in wartime. It's a horrible feeling. I'm experiencing it now. No, as you're reading, am I right? Are you guys feeling it? You're reading it and you're feeling you're feeling it when you're reading it. You're feeling these terrible, yeah,
Mhm.
it's terrible, terrible. Okay, such usage, and you see the word blaspheming. A lot of the terms are what things that happen in the war, Huh? Hamas. Yeah, Hamas, that's their name. God must not allow the enemy to go on blaspheming forever. Such usages highlight the specter of Israel's interminable suffering, thus amplifying the urgency of the prayer. The next verse, "Zechor adcha kanita kedim, ge'alta shevet na'atecha har Sion zeh shechanta bo." The psalmist immediately contrasts days long ago, calling upon God to recall how he redeemed Israel and chose to settle on Mount Zion. The term long ago, kedim, here brings positive connotations to mind, like verse 12, in marked contrast to the word now, which denotes the contemporary dismal reality, verse 6. According to the past tense verbs of the sentence, accordingly, the past tense verbs of the sentence allude to the paradigmatic time of divine intervention on Israel's behalf. The splitting of the sea and the selection of Zion as God's dwelling place. In fact, the phrase Am zu kanita and Am zu ga'alta, as well as Had Nahalatcha, are borrowed from the celebratory Song of the Sea in Exodus 15. A separate section of our study below focuses exclusively on clarifying how language from the Song of the Sea and elsewhere in Exodus is redeployed in Psalm 74. I'm sure some of you, if you're looking at the Mizmor, are catching some of these terms. Right away, you'll start to catch it.
Split the sea.
Going very strongly with the last verses of Echa.
But how come you're saying that? Oh, that. Oh, you mean you said it? I'm sorry. Yes. You remember those words? Yes. Certainly, Echa does that. Of course. Harima pe'amecha lemashuot netzach kodera oyev bekodesh.
Isn't he referencing more, Yerushalayim and
No,
and
the Yom Mitzrayim.
The temple also. You'll see. You're gonna see it all. We're gonna try and get there as fast as possible. The ruined state. If you, those of you, when I read Hebrew again, if you don't know it, look at the English. It's right there. The ruined state of the temple is described as perpetual by use of the theme word nitzach, a rhetorical exaggeration meant to evoke the urgency of the situation. The term mo'adecha here refers to a place, specifically God's meeting place. That, one second, I gotta move this. Yeah, God's meeting place, the Temple of Jerusalem, right? Like Mo'ade'il that we just said in verse 8. It is worth noting, however, that this word derives from the root vad, which generally carries a temporal connotation. In fact, the locative use of mo'ed appears to stem from its temporal meaning, referring to the appointed meeting times associated with specific location, right? That's why that's where you meet, right? At specific times, right? As we shall see, Psalm 75 responds to the prayer of Psalm 74 with the phrase, Ki ekach mo'ed, when I decide the time. This is yet another example of the kind of subtle wordplay employed by the psalmist that we have frequently observed. Ve'ata, the phrase, and now, heightens the contrast between the present destruction of the temple, which is so vivid that it seems tangible, and also representative of the current state of suffering in the immediate aftermath. And the good old days, kedim, first mentioned in verse 2, and then again, Elohim Malki Mekedim, again we find that the negative statements of the psalm are associated with the present or very recent past, while the positive descriptions are associated with the distant past. Revise, okay. This is a draft. As noted above, the phrase how long, adma, ending the statement in verse 9 is joined to the how long, admatai, opening verse 10. The references to our signs and the prophet that is no longer to be found, allude to the signs given to Moses and Israel in the Exodus. Of course, the archetypical example of God's concern for Israel in the past, lamenting the current sense of disconnection from that time. Verse 10 again uses the theme word lenetzach here in order to stoke God's vengeance by focusing his attention on the perpetual blasphemies against him uttered by Babylonian destroyers. Just 1 second. Yeah. So what is he trying to do? Just want to tell you, when I say the words to stoke God's vengeance, he wants to get God angry. He is talking and praying for relief, right? Because when he says Admatai, how long? He wants relief. So how does he want to get relief? He wants God to get angry. How could you do this? How could you put up with this? And he says things that incense you. They're incensing you, but he wants to incense God. He wants God to get very angered. Here, at the beginning of the second section, in the turning point of the psalm, the psalmist turns to describe God's might as displayed from primeval days. Again, the days of old are presented as a time of salvation through direct divine intervention, which the psalmist is desperate to see repeated in the present.
How do you want God to get angry?
He wants God to get angry and go after Hamas.
But the people are full. When they say they're
So what?
So how could you use anger as
Who is at fault? All those people that died for their innocence?
the corrupt people, I guess?
Okay, I just brought that up to you before and said the bad guys, he's never lamenting the destruction of evil people.
Clearly,
You're crying because it's got a rotten guy who had blood on his hands died. You're not crying in a guy. You get on the floor, you die because millions of people died. World War II, the Holocaust. Were they evil Jews who got killed? Well, you're not crying for guys who were murderers over there. You're crying for all the innocents. All wars are nothing more than collateral damage to what percent of the people who die in wars are collateral damage? How much way too many. Millions too many, right? Millions. There is a handful of people, a power group, 1 million strong, 500,000 strong, whatever the number is, right? The rest of the people are like a bunch of sheep being led around, being killed, being murdered, right? In these verses, the words for day, night, summer, winter, not to mention the celestial lights, which usher in the days, refer to God's complete mastery of the forces of nature. But in particular, those which mark the passage of time. There is a subtle allusion here to the aftermath of the great flood, when God promised to never again wreak such an extensive destruction upon humankind, using all 4 of the same terms for day, night, summer, winter. Od kol yemeh, this is important, Mars. Look inside. Od kol yemeh haaretz zera v'kasir kor v'hon v'kayitz v'choref v'yom v'layla lo yishbotu. Right? That's in Genesis 8:22, when God says those things will and when when he's saying it's not going to happen again, right? It's going to all be good. So therefore, this reference to the covenant with Noah, clear, right? We're pointing out to you that the terms L'chai Yom, Af L'chai Laila, we're pointing that, and we're pointing that Atat Savta Kol Gevulot Eretz Kayitz V'Choref Atayir Sartam. So you have Yom and Laila, right? And then you have Kayitz and Choref in the next pasuk. So that's 16 and 17. That's what we're talking about. Yes. It reminds you of creation also. Yes. But the term, just for you, I'm going to say it now. Kayitz and Choref only occurs in that 8:22 verse, and over here. You never see the term again anywhere in Tanakh. This reference to the covenant with Noah is part of a larger rhetorical strategy to bring about divine intervention, which we will address in more detail in a later section. Remember, we're doing a quick review so that you get a good sense of this Mizmor. When we finish this quick review, you're going to be very comfortable with how the Mizmor sounds and what's going on, right? In addition, the word for winter, Horef, appears to be a subtle play on the word for,
Really?
in the Mizmor, Heref, right? He tells them, how are you letting them, right? Say, blaspheme your name. So he uses Horef, right? One of the theme words of the psalm, which appears in the very next verse and elsewhere in the psalm. The very next thing. We're going to show you through the course of this commentary how what I just now said is not a midrash, right? Because I realized that when I said that, you say, oh, Horef, it's on purpose. On purpose, that's a nice midrash. No, it's not a nice midrash, and you'll see it as time goes on. We're going to show you that that's exactly what's happening. The theme of perpetuity, of God's abandonment of Israel to their enemies, resumes with the final occurrence of Netzah in verse 19. The connection of this theme word with the commands to remember, zechor, and not forget, al tishkach, corresponds to the very opening of the psalm. Why have you deserted forever, Lenetzah? And remember, zechor, the community you made yours long ago. In a chiastic manner, adding among a host of other literary correspondences from beginning to end to the chiasmic structure of the psalm. Chiastic structure explained below. Okay. 22 and 23. The concluding verses once again connect pleas to God to remember and not forget, with words connoting the endlessness of the turmoil caused by the enemy, Kol Hayom and Tamid. Moreover, they serve to conclude the psalm with much the same feeling of ongoing desperation that opened it. RB.
That's you.
It's me saying that there was an Olat Tamid, right? And Mizmor, wherein I'm pointing out that I want to make a note.
Serve to is one word.
What?
Serve to is one word.
Yeah. This is unedited. It's okay. Of course. The last words of this was Mara Ole Tamid, right? That's got to remind you of Olat Tamid,
Every day.
right? You say obviously, but the question would be why end off on Olat Tamid with Ole Tamid, right?
Then every day.
All the Asaf Mizmorim use terms like this, conclude on these ideas, and have all priestly terms that come up with an objective. So it's not just to randomly refer to a sacrificial, a priestly term. We'll call them priestly terms, right? But rather, it has very specific objective of beyond that, which we'll talk about.
To point out just quickly, the zechor, al tishkach bracket, isn't that obviously, from Amalek?
Also, sure. Zechor al tishkach, yes.
So it's a kind of also making sure that
He remembers.
if he's asked, the request here of God is show up, save this from getting any worse. And oh, by the way, it could be that bad.
By the way, you tell us to remember and not forget.
Right.
How about you remember and not forget?
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point to bring up because that's what I'm saying happens here with when he's speaking to God. So you're saying he's using a term to God that says, you tell us to remember and not forget and don't let them get away with it. How about you remember and don't forget? Yeah, it's good. It's good. Right. It's good. Other theme words. Beyond the various temporal terms, Psalm 74 features a number of keywords and phrases emphasized by repetition and corresponding usage. These serve to focus the reader's attention to the key themes and nuances of the psalm. Visual representative of these terms, some of the corresponding to the table below. We're not going to go into this table right now. You can skip the table, right? And we'll read. In addition, oh, you're looking at the table?
Yes, a little.
Yes. There's a lot that there's not one thing in that table that's extra. Yeah, it's very potent. We're going to cover all of it. We're going to cover all of it. I'm telling you, we're going to cover all of it.
Okay.
Just you got to get your feet wet, guys. You got to get into it. In addition to the highlighted terms already discussed in the previous two sections, ad, lama, kedem, shachar, zachar, shachar, heref, netzach, ad matai, ma. The most notable theme words are as follows. The word ought,
Right.
sign. Now we're getting into them as more now.
Okay.
The word ought, sign, appears 3 times. Twice in verse 4 and once in verse 9. In the latter verse, the phrase, ototenu lo ra'inu, we don't see our signs. No signs appear for us, is directly connected to the notion that, quote, there is no longer any prophet and od nabi, right? Right? Is directly connected to the notion that there is no longer a prophet. The juxtaposition conveys, for all of you who are listening, look at the text. You seeing it, Morris? Read it, Morris. Read the verse again, just so we hear you say it.
Verse 9.
Yeah.
Ototenu lo ra'inu, en od navi, v'lo itanu yodea adma.
Right? The juxtaposition conveys that the days of old, when God intervened for Israel by appointing Moses as their leader and giving him necessary signs, are long gone. Correspondingly, as verse 4 notes, now the enemy invaders of the temple have replaced Israel's signs from God, taking their own signs for true signs. Samu, ototam, otot. So these are key statements in the Mizmor now, right? Ototenu lora. But you know what he says over there? Samu, ototam, otot. That means, of course, in an ancient world siege, you can think of the city is surrounded by people who you can't touch, who can call out to you and say the most vile things. And they did, of course. We're going to come in there. We're going to burn you alive. We're going to rape your, we're going to, you know, they say the most vile things that you could think of. And the people inside the city are listening to this and are helpless to do it. But they can call back and say, no, you're not. I mean, but that's how you have to think of what it's like. But they now make their signs. You know what they say? We're coming in there and your God is gone and our God is winning, and they're carrying signs. They have flags, right? Don't think 2,500 years ago that flags, that things, that all of these things. And what do those things say? The name of their God and how they're going to prevail and how they're going to destroy your God. So not only ototenu lora inu, no, not only we don't have signs, their signs are winning. The world is looking. That means he's telling God, the prayer to God. The world is looking and saying, you're helpless. And the world is saying, oh, they have nothing going for them. And the world is saying, your signs are zero, and our signs are the right signs and the true signs. And the proof of the pudding is in the pie. We're coming in there and we're killing you all. And they did. No. He's talking about post. The statement is, remember, after the destruction, these statements are being made. They're not made before the destruction. He described, remember there, he described the scene of them ripping it, turning it into sawdust, right? The ark and all those things. So it happened. So he's telling God, you're letting them You're letting, not only when they're blaspheming your name. All the things that you
That's you.
don't, it's against you. Mockery of you, and they succeeded and are succeeding. And you know what? They didn't say for a week. They're succeeding. They're thriving, right? That's how you have to understand it. While these are only taking their Samuel, while these are the only explicit references to ought. You listening now? This is important. We find that the letters and sound of the words are ubiquitous. A separate section below the word ought, it's headed the word ought, will illustrate the psalmist's intricate use of this word. In fact, as we shall see, it can be considered the most important of the theme words in the psalm, as the apparent absence of God's signs during the destruction of the temple is the central element of the lament. Did you hear that? That's what this whole, that's what's going on. It is at the bottom, is at the core of this lament. You notice it called a lament, like you said, Echa, right? Lamentations. Well, this is a lament.
His version.
Yeah.
Tehillim.
Well, it's the same writer, right? Psalm 74 contains an abundance of words related to the temple, such as Moadecha, Miktasheka, Moadei El, Sion, Kodesh, right? All of these are found in the first section, verses 1 to 11. And many of them have to, by the way, there's 3 sections to this. I should have said that to you. I'm sorry. Verses 1 to, let me see the verse number. Let me get this out, Morris. Yeah, verses 1 to 11 are section 1, right? Where you know what? I'm going to take a second to read to you. I skipped it at the beginning, everybody, but I'll read it to you. Morris, you don't have a copy, huh? You're not looking at a copy. Well, I was going to let you read it. The three sections, but I'll read it to you now. Here.
That's page 272.
Okay.
Hmm.
It's easier for me to read it to you than to, what'd you say the page was?
272.
272. Okay. Section 1. The psalmist directs a series of pointed questions at God as part of an intense plea that he end the state of rejection, shame, suffering initiated by the destruction of the sanctuary. This section relates the victory of the cruel enemy and gives rare insight to their mindset, both their intentions to wreak utter destruction and their blasphemous understanding of their success as evidence of their defeat of the God of Israel. Allusions to Exodus are employed to show how the enemy's signs have taken the place of Israel's signs from God. Section 2, verses 12 to 17. You seeing it, Morris? This section begins with the central verse, which represents the major turning point in the psalm, verse 12. The psalmist described God's mighty deeds of the distant past, invoking them as a kind of precedent for the divine intervention requested in the present. Specifically, the text alludes to the, quote, signs, end quote, and wonders performed by God for Israel during the Exodus, from God's designation of Moses as Israel's leader until the climax of the splitting of the sea. It further refers to God's displays of might at the time of the great flood, his wiping out of the wicked, and the culmination with Noah's covenant. Section 3. The psalmist offers repeated intense prayer that God act for the defense of his own name from the arrogant, blasphemous enemy. Again, there is no allusion to the enemy's offenses against God, but here, after having mentioned the flood narrative and the signs of Exodus in the prior section, the psalmist also asks God to remember the covenant and end the suffering of the righteous among his people. Thus, 3 parts of the psalm are structured chiastically such that the first and last sections consist of similar requests that God act in response to the assault on the temple, which is couched as a blasphemous affront to God's name. However, the parallel requests are tinged with different meaning due to the mention of God's miraculous intervention in history in the section, in the middle section. Psalm 74 must be understood with the context of its place in the sequence of Asaph, which I talked to you about. We can go back. All right. Back to where we are. Okay. Thank you for that. Good. We skipped the theme words, right? And Kodesh, oh, good. Okay. So, all of these found in first section, verses 1 to 11, as many of them have possessive suffixes stressing God's unique connection to the place. The first section highlights the enemy's violation of God's temple as part of the wider goal of the psalm to coax God's intervention. By the end, however, the temple ceases to be the main focus and is replaced by the enemy's blasphemous mockery of God. This organizational feature is readily understood in light of the prior two Asaph Psalms, which, as we have seen, focus on the egregious misconduct of the Jerusalem priesthood. In focusing initially on the destruction of the temple, the psalmist connects the historical tragedy befalling Israel to the priesthood he criticized. But after doing so, his prayer and focus shift to the ongoing blasphemies of the enemy, the downtrodden state of the people, the poor and destitute, in God's own honor. The conceptual relation between priestly immorality and the disastrous destruction of the temple is captured by the repetition of the word for ruin, meshuot, at the end of Psalm 73. Read the end of Psalm 73.
Where's Pasuk?
Yeah.
Vani.
No,
Yes.
I need, where's my Tanakh? Here. I'll read it for you. It says, at the end of 73, you see this term. It's not the last, it's towards the end. Here, it's in verse 18. You see that, Mars?
Yeah.
Translate it.
You surround them with flattery. You make them fall through blandishments.
Meshuot. I wonder if this word is related to the Shoah. Yeah. Meshuot. So you make them to go into ruin, right? Okay. So you cause them to fall into ruin. In Psalm 74:3, however, the same word is used to describe the devastation wrought by the invading Babylonians. Lift up your feet to the perpetual ruin, lemeshuot, all the evil wrought by the enemy in the sanctuary, right? Now, the repetition serves as a bridge, giving a clear indication of the relation between the retribution faced by the corrupt priests and the calamitous destruction of the temple now suffered by the entire nation. This term, right, meshuot, occurs where else besides 73 and 74? Nowhere. That's it. You see them back to back. One is talking about one side of it. The other one is now look at this meshuot, right? So it's doing to refer back and to talk about contrast. Yes, Joe. So Joey wants you to know that the word meshuot has the word ought in it. Right?
That's the
That's the ach one. That's correct. He's remembering something right. I'm going to take a minute now because Joey did that, and I want to take you. I want to take you now. I want to take you all the way down because of what Joey did. We'll do it now. And I'm going to let you see what goes on in this Mizmor. Go to page. It's it starts with the words the signs and wonders in Egypt. On page, I don't know what page you have that on. Somebody who has the article. You use this and turn to the signs and wonders in Egypt. No, you're the wrong way.
Is that after the section that says the word?
295.
295.
Oh, I got it right there.
Wait, I skipped the ought section. No, did you say is
No.
that after? No, it's before that. It's before it.
That's not the oath.
No, it comes after this. Psalm 74 also make numbers of allusions to words and phrases associated with the long narrative from the appointment of Moses as prophet to the 10th plagues and the final events leading up to the Exodus, which is what we're talking about these days, right? We're going to show how it does this. This comes as no surprise given the psalmist's heavy allusion. You don't know, I skipped it. Shirat Hayam is all throughout this Mizmor. And the example of 74 is Amzu, Kanita, Ga'alta, right? And so on and so forth. I'll come back to that because I want Joey is anxious for you to see that. And I'd like you to see some of it before we end the class today. This comes no surprise, beginning of the psalmist, the song of the sea noted above, and is more general concern to recall God's miraculous signs and wonders in the days of old. Here we count a few examples. Son maritecha, ga'alta, shevet, ro'etzon, right? All of those terms are terms that occur. In these first verses of the psalm, we find reference to Israel as sheep of your flock, a metaphor pervasive in Exodus and in particular describe Moshe. He's Moshe Hayaro Etzon Yetrochot Noah, right? We just finished reading that. Who is explicitly identified as shepherd in 3:1. In addition, while Shevet means tribe, this word can also signify a staff. In the Exodus narrative, Moses' staff referred to this synonym mater, another word meaning both tribe and staff. I'm going to skip that now. Psalm 74:4. Samu ototam otot. In light of the allusions in the first verses noted above, the psalmist's first reference to signs invites the reader to recall the signs which God gives to Moses in Exodus narrative. In the following section, we will offer a full analysis of the importance of signs and the use of the word ought throughout the psalm. For now, however, it will suffice to enumerate the verses alluding to signs in the narrative. If you'll all look at Shemot, you see this text that's in front of you? You all know these terms. So I'm going to read them first. AB, you know them also? Yes? 4:9. You take me 4:17. 4:28. ויגע משה אל אהרון כל דברי אשר אשר אהב את כל האותות אשר ציווהו. וידבר אהרון על כל דברים אשר דיבר אל משה ויעשה אותות לעיני העם. And then הרביתי אותותיי ואת מופתיי. And then למחר יהיה האות הזה. And then למען שיתי אותותיי אלה בקרבו. And then ולמען תספר בו זה בנך ובנך אשר תורתי ומסיים את האותות אשר שמתי. You all know these, so I'm reading them very first. Eli, you're all good with all of these. Yes. And then 13:9. And then 16. We find that there are exactly 14 uses of the word in 13 different verses, and that the signs refer variously to those which God gave Moses to prove his mission to Israel and Pharaoh, to the plagues which God inflicted upon Egypt, and finally to the signs Israel is to display in order to remember God's actions on her behalf. When the passages are carefully examined, many more connections to 74 become apparent. For example, in Exodus it says, in verse 1, in Exodus 10:1, in 10:2, Asher samti bam vida'atem ki ani Adonai. In verse 2, God refers to recounting among the Israelites of how he made a mockery of the Egyptians, how I displayed my signs among them, vit ototai asher samti bam, in order that you may know that I am the Lord, vida'atem ki ani Adonai. The expressed purpose is in line with the multiple in order that you may know, leman tedat statements made in Exodus. At that time, God desired to make it known through his signs that he alone had power in the midst of the earth, bekerev haaretz. A direct contrast to this notion is found in 74:4-5. As we have seen in verse 4, the psalmist sadly observes the enemies establishing their own signs, Samo Ototamo taught, as they work to destroy God's sanctuary. As in Exodus 10:2, the statement concerning the placement of signs results in a type of knowledge. Look at the word now. In Psalm 74, verse 5, what does it say, Mars?
You got that?
Yivada ki mebi lemala bisboch etz kadumot. Now, it seemed, you see the word, the way the translators translated, it seemed as when men wield axes in a thicket of trees. Good?
Yeah.
But you see, it's using the word yivada on purpose. And they are clueless. All of the scholars, I'm telling you for 1,000 years, they're clueless. What's yivada? You know what he's telling God? Leman tedu, leman teda, right? So you know what he tells God? Yivada. You know what's known? That's what's known. What became known at that time, however, was the devastation of God's sanctuary by the enemy. The contrast with God's own signs could not be clearer. You see, I wanted to just show you one example of when the scholars fight with this and they go crazy and they go, it seemed, it is, yivada. What is the word veda? It means yivada, just like it says. But when they read it, they go, but it doesn't make any sense. You know why it doesn't make any sense to them? Guys, they are listening in the Zoom because they have no idea what the Mizmor is talking about. You've already, in the last almost an hour, gotten introduced into the Mizmor a little bit. And when you're introduced into it now, and you hear Yivada, and you just now read Vidatem Ki Ani Hashem, right? You, of course, know, as we said, that he wants to get God to move off of his position. You said Vidatem Ki Ani Hashem, but you know what's now known? Yivada. This, the most horrible thing. So when he is doing it, how do you think he's expecting God to react? He's telling God, you said it's all to know that you're God. You know what's known now? They're taking the name. He doesn't say it. He did. He says they're throwing it down on the floor. What he's really saying is they're chopping the letters, they're chopping the thing, they're chopping it into, they turned it into sawdust with axes, they're chopping it. That's what's known in the world right now. How could you allow that? So when you read this Mizmor, not like you're reading it tonight, if you read this while you're at home and you read it by yourself, you just go right over that verse. You know what he say? You know what he say about most of this Mizmor? Well, it's poetic and it means things that are bad and it seems, and they have no idea what to do with these at all. The scholars just completely lost. They say, no idea. So in line with this contrast, a further subtle allusion to the plague narrative is evident in 74:12. Velohim malki mikedim poel yeshuot bekerev haaretz. And my God, God, my King of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. What is bekerev haaretz? Do you remember, Mars? Take a look at verse 18 from Exodus chapter 8. Exactly. Right? He tells him in verse 16, get up in the morning, hit your seven paro, amate abduni, 7 people. And he was there, what? I'm going to send the Arov. And Umaleu, Batem Misraim, the houses of Egypt are going to get filled. Itarov, the Gam had the mash him aleh, and the land that they're on. Vifleti Bayoma, the wonders. It's Goshen, right? Asher Ami, right? Aleha, Libiltihiyot Samrov. And you know what? It's going to be amazing. There's not going to be any Arov where the Jewish people live, right? Leman Teda, in order that you know, Teda, Ki ani Hashem bekerev haaretz. So he goes like this when he talks to God in verse 12. Morris, read it. Morris, verse 12. Great. He tells, you know how he refers to God, and he goes like, you know how he's talking to God? Look, he goes like this. And Hashem, my king of all, Bekerev, who does Yeshuot Bekerev Haaretz. And then what is the next verse? 13. Anybody at all who has Hebrew in front of them. He goes on to talk about the amazing things that you did, referring to all those things, right? While the phrase in the midst of the land, Bekerev Haaretz, is not unique to these two passages, the closely related contexts are suggestive of a conscious allusion to the psalmist who was explicitly referring to God's salvific acts in times of old. Particularly relevant for the psalmist, in Exodus 8:18, God makes known the intentions behind his miraculous acts associated with the fourth plague, that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the land. As we have just observed, this motive underlying this and many of his other signs on behalf of Israel and Egypt is played upon in Psalm 74, verses 4 and 5, where the contrasting establishment of the enemy's own signs directly result in knowledge of the destruction of God's sanctuary, Yevi, Yivadak, and Kadmod, framed as a threat and insult to his supreme power. Now, I want you to know that if you read all of Tanakh, One second. If you jump too fast, Joe, you know it'll be like, what do you call it? You'll get colorblind. This Mizmor, in all of Tanakh, there is no place where you'll see the intensity of how he talks to God with pressuring him. You don't know it till when you know. I showed you one thing now. I'm going to show you more. I'm going to show you much more.
In the very beginning.
Okay, here you are. I'm showing you how this is tracing Shemot all the way on through the plagues. I'm showing you this is exactly tracing it, not close. It's an exact follow-up and commentary on the Torah. How intense is his prayer? His intense is, AB asked me, he wants God to get angry. He wants God to do bit. That's exactly what he wants. He wants relief. You know what's going on? To answer AB better now for his question, it's the middle of the Holocaust and people are being burned daily. Millions are being killed. He wants relief. You know how hard he presses? With everything he's got.
He invokes everything.
You know what's gone? You, the thing that you said you want. He's not afraid. He talks to God. You said you want, so they'll know. Ani Hashem. Yeah, you know what they know now? And he's talking with as powerful and as much of a, because God is letting it happen. He believes in God. He knows God's watching all of this. He doesn't think God's watching it. He knows it. He's not an atheist. So he goes, you know this is happening. You're letting this happen. Your name. You said. You committed. And now it's going on as I'm talking to you. How could you allow such a thing? Of course, by implication, he does say how you could allow. He, in effect, is saying, how could you allow this? Ad matai. When he says ad matai, that's like saying, how long can you let this go on? It's unbelievable. I can't believe you letting it go on. It doesn't make any sense. By the way, the 75th Mizmor, God responds to this. Okay. That's where we're headed. Directly, not somewhat of a response. Direct. A direct, complete, and absolute response to every one of these overwhelming statements, the charges, which are great charges. He's not leaving a stone unturned, as you shall see. We're getting late. I want to read for the next. Go ahead.
You're trying to embarrass God into this position. You just
sure, certainly. Yes. 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 He wants to embarrass. He wants to anger him. You know,
he'll be saying you did all this and now you can't even do.
What are you doing? the Navi has
His anger
no,
is
you know, what do you call it? No, he leaves no stones unturned, and he has no, he's not afraid. He just says it all. Now, God lets him say it. So he says, didn't Moshe tell God, since the time you sent me, things got worse. What'd you send me for? He doesn't let go. He's not God gives him the freedom. He doesn't tell him, how dare you talk like that? He expresses his true feelings. So God is going to answer him not by telling him, how dare you speak to me like that? God is going to answer him and justify his actions. But you can never see it in a million years. So everybody bear with me. Don't look at 75. Don't waste your time. Don't hurt yourself. Listen to me. I'm trying to get your patience. You know, it's hard to read a thing and just be patient. Be patient. I spent a lot of time getting you to this point where you're starting to see things you never saw before. If you give me a little bit more time, I'll try and end by 9 o'clock, giving you a little bit more of this so you get a sense of how it works. The description of the enemy's destruction of the temple in 74 ironically draws upon language used to depict God's destructive acts as exhibited through the 7th plague in Exodus. Shilahu ba'esh mikdashecha la'aretz hilu mishkan shemecha. Now, they have set the sanctuary on fire. They've profaned the dwelling place of the name to the ground. They've thrown it to the ground. They took it and they threw it to the ground, right? They burned it and they took it, and he says they threw it on the ground. Listen what I say. Let's see if I can read it to you first. The awkward phrasing in 74:7, Shilhu be'esh mikdashecha and then la'aretz, has presented translators with some difficulty. However, when it recognized that the words fire, ground, and cast derive from the account of the plague of hail in Exodus, the wording is readily understandable. With the choice of words, the psalmist depicts a startling reversal. In the days of old, God illustrated his might by raining down hail on Egypt, causing fire to stream down to the ground. Now the enemy illustrates his own might, sending fire to bring the sanctuary down to the ground, dishonoring God's dwelling place, and in effect, replacing the signs of God with his own. Now, I skipped it. Take a look. If you go back now to Exodus 9:22-34, you see them, Mars?
Yeah.
Vayet Moshe et Mateo al Hashemayim v'Adonai natan kolo dobrav tihalech ish arza vayimter Adonai barad al eretz Mitzrayim vahi barad ve'esh mitlakat b'toch barad, and then b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and then vayach habarad b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and then ve'et kol etz hasadeh shibad rakbat be'eretz Goshen, etc., etc., and then ha'atiru el Adonai v'rab miyot kolot elim barad v'yishlahacha etchem v'lo tosifu lam. And then vayomer Allah Moshe ketzet elir efroset kapay el Adonai hakolot yihdalun. The sounds will stop, right? The barad and the barad lo ye'od leman tedaki l'naya aretz. So you have kolot, arza, shelah, vilosha, etc., etc., etc. So I'm showing you that what does he do? He's now going to the plagues, taking the terms that we use in the plagues. I showed you, I'm going very fast now. I'm going very fast. And he takes the terms, flips them, and says, that's what they did to you now, right? Now, let's do this one and we'll end. We'll try and end.
They're throwing you to the ground and they're burning you.
Right. Now, you know who's going to enjoy this? Eli, I think you're going to enjoy the next one because you were in the class in the summer where I talked about the Otod. Watch the next one. Psalm 74:11. Lema tashiv yadcha. Why are you holding back your hand? V'minecha, and your right. Mikerev hakecha chaleh. Take your hand, take it out of your bosom. Now, at the time in the summer when I told you this, I told you, Rabbi Sassoon says, you know, he's talking about that. Oh, magic. He's telling him, don't be passive. What do you, right? That's when he tells Moshe, put your hand in your bosom. That's the sitting position of relaxation at ease. This is the at ease position, right? So he tells him, put your hand in your bosom. So he tells him, he turns it to Sarah. You'll waste away. When he told them with the snake, he told them, hold it by its tail. Your prophetic powers are potent. If you are not careful with your prophetic powers, they'll come back to bite you. So you treat them like you're holding a snake by its tail. If you react and say, oh, this is dangerous, I'm not going to get involved with this, and then you're passive, which is this, if you put it in, then you're going to rot away, right? They're both no good. You've got to be balanced with, that's what they were taught. So now look. Vayomer Hashem lo od. And so in our Mizmor, it's lama tashib yatcha. Over here, you see where the Mizmor says that this is what the od means. Why you're holding your hand back and take your right hand out of your bosom. What is he telling God? What are you sitting around? You told Moses not to be passive, right? So he goes like this. Vayomer Hashem lo od. Habena yatcha behakecha. You see all the highlighted letters over here. And he gets back to normal. By employing the same distinctive language as Exodus 4:6-8, Yad, Hek, Shub, the psalmist creates an ironic play on that passage, which concerns one of the signs given to validate Moses as a prophet. In those days of old, provided such signs urging Moses not to remain passive and to accept his weighty responsibility as a prophet. The psalmist here turns the tables by applying the very same language to God, now urging him not to remain passive and to act with care towards his people in the present. In effect, this should be understood as a follow-up to the psalmist's key statement in verse 9, which is, Ototenu lo ra'inu, we don't see our otot, and od navi, there's no more a prophet, and then he says, take your hand out of your bosom. The two terms no one ever, by the way, I want you to know, I'm telling you things that no one has ever connected. Ever. But when you hear it now, listen, it's like, is it Pashut Menahim? It's Pashut to follow up. We don't see any signs. We don't have an Navi. Oh, who does that make it? Once you hear the words En Od Navi, Lo Kam Navi Od Ke Moshe, you know when you say En Od Navi, you think of Moshe. And the minute you think of that, he tells him, what are you leaving your hand in your bosom for? Yatni, you know what you told Moshe. You told him you can't overreact. You can't underreact, right? You'll rot. So he says to God, what are you leaving your hand in your bosom for? Take Yaminecha out. And he says, Yaminecha, you know why? Yaminecha Hashem Nidarabkov. Yaminecha Teratz Oyev. Isn't that always the occurring Yaminecha? So now.
Counted in page 297, counted all the times it says the word od.
Right.
You said that it's exactly 14 times.
Correct.
Is that deliberate for the word yad? That is his.
Oh, I have no idea. Wow.
That's
The
his
sun.
hand.
I have no idea. I think it's
So is the hand.
I don't know. Maybe.
Not in the chekecha, it's out there.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe. But we're late. I want to finish these words. It's very good. It's very good. And you know why I'm happy? You're really following everything I'm saying. I'm getting the points across. This is hard work. The signs that God provided at the time have indeed been replaced, and there is no longer a prophet to lead as Moses did. As we have observed, the crucial question of the duration of the lowly state at the end of Psalm 74:9, how long, is restated at the beginning of the very next verse. Ad matai? How long? You know, it has to start going like this. How long are you going to keep this up? How long are you going to keep doing this? That's how you have to read this. How long? God, how long? So that you have to think of Moshe going like this. How could you do this? How could you act like this? You act like this? How could you do this? You have to think of that. When you read the Mizmor, you don't do that. But when you read it now, you go, how long can you keep this up? How in heaven's name can you put up with that? And then, take your hand out of your bosom. You know, I didn't say take your hand. I said, take your hand out of your bosom. Take your right hand and stop being passive. I'm talking with anger on purpose. So you should get a sense of how much he's pushing. He's not afraid to say this. To answer AB again for the 50th time, people are dying. Suffering is going on beyond comprehension. How can you put up with this like that? He losing it, but he's not losing it. He's being very careful about every single word he says. 1 second now. This question is itself a reference to the recurrence of the phrase ad matai in Exodus 10:3, referring to the amount of time that Pharaoh refuses to humble himself. Because don't the Egyptians tell him, ad matai, how long are you going to keep this up? There's not going to be any Egypt left, they tell him. Even his court tells him that, right? Referring to the question of Pharaoh's courtiers concerning how long Moses will be a snare unto us. Now, I want to see if I can end on this note. Just 1 minute. Oh, no. The next is going to be like that. Okay, now I want to say something before we end the class, because Joey brought it up. This was more. If you'll go to the word ought used in Psalm 74. Guys, can we go for 5 more minutes? Anybody? 7 more minutes? If you got to go, you got to go. Say we'll do it next week. I just want to start you on it. The people online, are you okay?
Stay home. Go ahead.
You're good.
Go
Okay.
for it.
The word ought, used in Psalm 74. In the previous sections, we demonstrated how the psalmist makes extensive allusions to God's miracles and signs in Genesis and Exodus as a way of promoting his prayer for God to intervene in the present, in which the divine signs have been replaced by those of the enemy, Samo ototam otot, and are no longer apparent, ototenu lorainu. In the present section, we return to the theme word ought, sign, which is in fact the essential focus and key to the psalmist's prayer. In particular, here we suggest that the phrase, our signs no longer appear for us. Everybody look at me in the room. Ototenu lorainu, right? The entire Mizmor is full of ought. Everywhere. No. In all the letters. And I'm going to show you now. And watch. You'll see. I wanted to end on this note. We suggest our signs don't appear for us in verse 9 was intended to be understood as an addition on an additional ironic level. Namely, the word ought itself is concealed. That is, we do not see it. Ototenu lorainu. We don't see the oughts, right? Clearly elsewhere in the psalm. Indeed, while the word does appear 3 times explicitly in verse 9, it only refers to the absence of our signs. Ototenu lorainu, right? And twice it refers to the enemy signs. Samo ototam otot. Are we good? Thus, looking only at the surface of the text, this device begins to reveal itself. Indeed, the reader must acknowledge our signs are not clearly present in this text. However, upon closer observation, it becomes clear just how ubiquitous both the phonetic sound ought and the letters comprising the word ought actually are in the text. As we shall see, the appearance of these markers throughout the psalm is illustrative of a sophisticated technique encountered also in Psalm 73 and other psalms, according to which individual words and even letters are chosen to carefully express the psalm's message. The following chart illustrates it. And you see the chart, everybody? Look at the word. Meshu ought has ought. You have ought. Keredu, mort. When he says about the axis chopping, it's keredu, mort. Kela, hort. And then he starts using second person, you see, where he starts ata porarta. What is ata porarta, Mars? Look at the chart. Or taught. Morris. Ata purata otot. Ata risatsta otot. Ata bakata otot. Ata hisafta. All the scholars go, why does he talk like this? Why is he using this? They go like this. Oh, well, it's like it's a poetic thing, but they miss the fact that it's all full of otot, right? How do you see it? Ata hobashta otot. Naharot etan. Ata hachinota ot. Right? Ata yisartam otot. Al tishkah ot. Neot hamas. Look how he put in the word. So he put it in meshuot. He put it in neot hamas. And of course, the last verse, al tishkah is ot, and ole tamid is ot. Right? So I wanted you to see this before we end to let you know that he takes the word ot and he puts it. And where does he place the word otot in? The otot.
What's the middle word?
Ata porarta be'oze chayam.
Middle word.
1 second. Ata risasa rashi leviatan. Ata bakata mayan. What is ata bakata mayan? Splitting of the sea, right? Ata kol kibbulot aris. How about hobashta? What's hobashta? What does that mean? So he says, you see it, Eli? You dried up the mighty waters, the Naharot Etan. But he says it, look at that verse, verse 15. Ata bakata mayam benal ata hobashta Naharot Etan. It's otot, 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 and otot. How many places did he put it in the Mizmor? Everywhere. Everywhere. And where did he put it? When he referred to the Otot and to the Mofetim. So not only is the word there, by the way, you know how many people have seen this in the last 2,500 years?
Nobody.
Nobody ever saw it. Isn't it exciting, guys? Nobody ever saw this, ever. But I can tell you this. Now you have the 2,500. No one ever saw it. It's around for 25. No one ever commented one word. But once you see it, anybody who I've shown this goes, oh, it's a for sure, because it's all referring to the otot, is referring to all the plagues, is referring to every single one of them in detail. Once you look at it, that's for sure. And then everybody goes, oh, otot. It's all otot. He puts in otot and he uses that, the second person ata and then bakata with the again masculine second person, right? Well, I'm saying this. Every time he's referring to what God did and telling him all these things, there's two things. We can take the stop the share now. I'll try and everybody faded away. Only Joey Mizrahi's left. It's late. We're very late. We're going very late. So I'll just say quickly, there's two things you could say here. One you could say is that he is reminding God, you could say, right? Because isn't he telling God, you did all of these things and you did all these otot, and where are they, right? Because we do have the words in the Mizmor of Samu ototam otot, right? And then you do have the words ototen olora'inu. But there could be another thing. Do you want to guess at what the other thing could be, Morris? Why is everything on even an atomic level otot?
I mean, he wants them to reappear. No?
No.
He needs to read it?
No, why did he do it this way? Why is it in every fiber of the Mizmor? I think those are the main answers. I think the answer I'm going to tell you now is the secondary one, and I think this is the main answers. I think the secondary one is that his frame of mind is that when he says we don't see the otot, he sees all the otot all the time. And of course they're there. And of course he's aware of them. And they're alive for him. and they're there, and he knows them, and he can't say it without infusing every single word that he says with his recognition. As much as he's pressing God, right? He sees those things that God did are alive. It's something like he can't say it without saying the ought. He can't say we don't see your autot without you do see them, but they're not explicit. But I see they're there. They're there. He doesn't. The autot are there. Aren't they there in this Mizmor? Every one of them are there. All the plagues are in here. All the autot are in here.
There as challenge.
He sees there.
That's correct. They're there as challenges.
He sees there, that's what sparks.
That's correct. So he sees his and he sees theirs. Yes, yes. That's why he brings it up. For him, those things for him are alive and they're in every fiber. He sees it constantly. But then, but this is all I see now, right? But this is all I see. So I think there's a what do you call that? When there's a tension between the two. So I think that plays into why it's in every letter, it's in every word, it's on an atomic level in the Mizmor. And of course, all of Shirat Hayam is in here. If we had the time, I'd show it to you. All of Shirat Hayam, all of the Keshet and the Anan, that it won't happen again, is referred to in here. So that ought, the famous ought of the Keshet, the famous autot over here, and the guarantee that it won't happen again, kites and horif, those, all of that's there. All of that's fresh for him. All of that's in his mind, and at the same time, none of that's happening, and none of it is true, and that's the claim to God. So he pushes God as hard as a human being could possibly push God, and he doesn't leave a stone. Get it? He doesn't leave a letter unturned. Did you like it? Was it interesting?
I have one,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
One, I'd say, not question.
Yeah.
An observation. A thought
Yeah.
that the point of all of this is to get us to do work, to get us to take action, right? Is it appropriate for you to be turning it to God, or is it supposed to be